Business Advisory Council, Dato Ramesh Kodamal, co-chair of the ASEAN India Business Council, business leaders of ASEAN, members of the ASEAN business community, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to be here with you. I feel honored to address this privileged gathering of the elders who have transformed Southeast Asia into one of the most dynamic regions of the world. I congratulate you for this achievement. I also congratulate you on the creation of one ASEAN community, which you are going to sign off tomorrow. India and ASEAN are natural partners. Our ties date back to ancient times. They continue to serve as a bridge between our countries and regions. Friends, I've been saying that the 21st century belongs to Asia. I say this because of the track record of the ASEAN countries. Together, ASEAN's 10 member countries form an economic powerhouse. ASEAN has emerged as one of the largest economic zones in the world. Last 15 years have seen your rapid and yet stable growth. Your macroeconomic stability has been the main reason for growth and stability in Southeast Asia. With good governance, futuristic infrastructure, and focus on new age technologies, you have created excellence. In simple things like tourism, you have done miracles. Once again, I compliment the leadership and people of ASEAN countries for what they have achieved. When I analyze the ASEAN miracle, I find that small countries of ASEAN and a big country like China both have done well. This shows that growth depends more on the spirit of the people rather than the size of population. I've had personal relations with many leaders of this region. I've also visited a number of places, number of times. Even as Prime Minister, my engagements with the ASEAN leadership started as soon as I took over. I met a member of ASEAN leaders in the last summit. My government took office nearly 18 months ago. The Indian economy faced serious challenges: a high fiscal deficit, a high current account deficit, a large number of stalled infrastructure projects, and a persistent inflation were among them. It was obvious that reforms were needed. We asked ourselves the questions: reforms for what? What is the aim of reform? Is it just to increase the major rate of GDP growth? Or is it to bring about a transformation in society? My answer is clear. We must reform to transform. In short, reform is not an end itself. Reform, for me, is just a way station on the long journey to the destination. The destination is the transformation of India. We have to take these fruits of development to the margins of our geography and to the bottom of our demography. We have to touch lives while reaching for the sky. By almost every major economic indicator, India is doing better than when we took office 18 months ago. GDP growth is up and inflation is down. Foreign investment is up and the current account deficit is down. Tax revenues are up and interest rates are down. The fiscal deficit is down and the rupee is stable. Obviously, this did not happen by an accident. And the world economy is not exactly doing well. This success is the result of a series of concerted policies. We have embarked on a course of fiscal consolidation. We have entered for the first time into a monetary framework agreement with the Reserve Bank to curb inflation. Even while cutting the fiscal deficit, we have substantially increased productive public investment. This has been made possible in two ways. Firstly, we have imposed carbon taxes on fossil fuels. We have taken the bold step of decontrolling diesel prices and thereby eliminated energy subsidies and have in fact imposed taxes on fossil fuels. We have increased the sales on coal by 300%. Globally, there is much talk of carbon taxes. We have actually acted. Secondly, we have reduced wasteful expenditure through innovative methods, including targeting subsidies to the deserving through technology. Overall, there is increased confidence within and outside the country. The IMF and World Bank have expressed even better hope for our economy this year and after. The Economist magazine this week stated that India is the healthier shape than any other big emerging economy. However, as I said, our aim is not mere reform, but reform to transform. Macroeconomic stability is good, but to transform India, much more needs to be done. We have begun a series of concentrated steps. This includes structural and institutional reforms. Agriculture remains India's mainstay in terms of providing livelihood. We have introduced a series of simple but powerful structural reforms. There was a tendency to divert subsidized fertilizer for the production of chemicals. We have found a simple but very effective solution. By neem coating the fertilizer, it becomes unsuitable for diversion. We are now moving towards universal neem coating. This has already saved billions of rupees of diverted farm subsidies. We have also introduced soil health card. This tells every farmer the condition of his or her soil and then enables him to choose the right crop based quantity and mix of inputs. We have launched a Housing for All program, one of the most ambitious in the world. It involves building 20 million urban houses and 29.5 million rural houses, totaling nearly 50 million houses. While the program will make sure no Indian is houseless, it will also generate a large amount of employment, that too mainly for the unskilled, the semi-skilled and the poor. We have undertaken major improvements in the transport sector. Over major ports witnessed a 4.65% growth in traffic and 11.2% increase in operating income in 2014-15, despite a global contraction in trade volume. The pace of award of new highway work has increased from 9 kilometers a day in 2013-14 to 23 kilometers a day currently. This will have a large multiplier effect throughout the economy. We were committed to restore credibility in the process of allocation of natural resources. My government has intervened with legislative and administrative measures to improve the supply of critical inputs and raw materials. They include coal, other minerals, and spectrum. The hallmark of this intervention is allocation through transparent auction. We started the Jan Dhan Yojana. In less than a year, we opened 190 million new bank accounts. On social security front, we have launched innovative and attractive scheme for insurance and pension. We have also set up Mudra Bank to fund the small traders who were unfunded so far. More than 6 million small traders have already availed the loans. While expanding the banking services, we are also taking steps to strengthen the banking system. Credible and capable bankers have been appointed to head banks. For the first time since banks were nationalized 46 years ago, private sector professionals have been appointed in key positions. We have taken concentrated action to revive stalled infrastructure projects. We have started a major revamp of the power sector. These measures will also benefit our banks. Let me now turn to issues of investment, which may be of more direct relevance to you. In a break with over 65 years of tradition, we have involved India's states in foreign policy. The Ministry of External Affairs has been asked to work with the states. When I visited China, a state-to-state summit was also held. And states have been asked to create export promotion councils. Making the states think globally is yet another reform with potential to transform. Our aim is to create jobs for more than 1 billion young hands.